stay idle right there. Hold that back pressure. Look at that. So good. Hey, it's Vas here from Aussie RC Airspace, and welcome to my very first formal review of an RC plane here on the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the Durafly Me-163 V2 that you see here. This was very kindly sent over to me by Hobbyking, and as you can see, I've actually got a couple of others that I've collected over the years. Now I'm going to go a little bit in depth with the review on this guy because I've had it for quite a long time, and there's probably a lot of settings and things like that that some of you might be curious about. And there's also a few changes that I've made to the aircraft along the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I always like to start off my reviews with the specs on the plane, just so that everybody knows what we're talking about. And the specs on this guy are as follows. Wingspan is 950 millimeters, length is 585 millimeters, flying weight is going to be somewhere around about the 850 gram mark. The ESC is a Durafly 40 amp brushless ESC. Motor is also a Durafly 2836 2200 kV outrunner. Now the plane does come with two 6x4 propellers included, and recommended battery is going to be a 4-cell 2200 milliamp. Now, one of the things that I find sometimes gets overlooked when it comes to RC plane reviews is actually the center of gravity. Although you can find that information in the manual, and Hobbyking do provide a little drawing in the sheet that comes with the plane, tells you that the CG is somewhere between 85 and 90 mil. Now that is measured from the joint edge of the wing. So where the wing meets the fuse, you measure back about 85 to 90 mil. Now on this aircraft here, I've actually got a couple of yellow dots underneath, which kind of matches the spinner and stuff. And that's where my CG marks are done. I didn't bother so much to do it on the V2 because I know roughly where the battery is going to go. I know what the batteries are going to, the batteries are that I'm going to be running. And essentially in the cavity that they provide, you pretty much bring the battery almost all the way forward, and that should give you the correct CG. I think sometimes I'll run it about 5 mil back, somewhere around there, and that's really about it. You don't really need to move the battery too much. Now that is with a 2200 4S. Of course, if you're using different size batteries, you may need to obviously check that. I don't really play around with the CG too much on these planes. I leave it pretty much as it is in the book. Purely because they have such a short fuselage that even a couple of millimeters out can sometimes throw it off a bit, and you'll start to sort of feel the difference as you're flying the aircraft. But as far as CG goes, go by the book. 85 to 90 mil is roughly where you want to be. You probably don't want to go back too far, and you should be right. You should have a great flying experience with this plane. So assembling the Me-163 is actually not very hard, but it does require a bit of gluing. So unlike the V1s, where the plane used to be pretty much assembled out of the box, you only had to glue on the vertical stab. Now you actually need to glue the main wings on. So the wings need to be glued on, and of course you also need to install the spar, which is the big black rod running through the center of the fuselage there. Keeps the wings nice and straight. They also give you some tape for you to hide the glue joints, which is actually a really nice touch. They've been doing this for pretty much since the beginning, believe it or not. And they also give you some tape for the underside as well. The only thing I did differently is I actually put a little bit of tape on the leading edges just here, just to stop this tape from peeling off, because it sticks right on the curve there. So that's the only sort of mod that I did there. After that, of course, you can glue on your vertical stab, and you need to feed the cable for the servo to go all the way forward. You can see the cable just running there. So that's for your rudder servo. And then you need to install the push rod. So you've got to install these little guys on here, and the push rods for the elevons for both left and right. The last thing is going to be to put on the ordnance, such as the little antenna on top here and the little torpedo tube. And then of course you got your prop and spinner to put on. Then finally, the only thing left to do is to of course install your receiver and set everything up. speaking of setup, this is going to be a new segment in my review where I talk about the setup that I've got for the aircraft that I'm reviewing. I'm going to share with you the settings on my radio, battery position, CG differences, anything in particular that's going to be a little bit different or that's going to help anybody that's looking at getting one of these aircraft. So we'll start with the mechanical stuff. So we'll start with the push rod, which is nice and simple. So you'll see how I've mounted the push rod here on the rudder. It's second hole in from the end. And then on the elevons, I've actually mounted this fourth hole down on the servo horn. And the reason for that is because this has got full span ailerons essentially, right? These are very touchy aircraft. And if you have the push rods any further up, it becomes really touchy. Now, I know some of you can go, well, we can just up the expo and dial down the rates. I had 65% expo on my V1 and I had my rates down to 35% and it was still too touchy. So now I'm running a slightly different setup. I've got my rods going down as far as they can go without hitting the foam, and it gives you a lot more resolution in your controls. It makes things a little bit smoother as well, and the setup is just perfect. Like, I've been flying these planes for years. For me, this setup works really, really well. Now, as far as my rates and everything goes, I'll show you here on the radio what I've got everything set up as, and hopefully the camera can pick all this up. So you can see here my aileron is at 75 and 35 for low rates, 85 and 40 for mid, and 95, 45 for high. Now, I will admit, I mainly used low and mid rates on my ailerons. My elevator, or rather my elevator is set up at 80, and then, so 80 and 40, we've got 90 and 45, and 150. And then my rudder, if I go across here, my rudder is at 95 and 20 across all of them. So that doesn't change regardless of what setting I'm on. And that's essentially how I've got my dual rates and expo set up. Now, my timer is set at 4 minutes. You can see there. I've got a timer switch just here. And the stopwatch kicks over. As soon as I give throttle, my throttle timer starts counting down. As soon as I go to idle, it will pause and this will keep going. So if I'm gliding around or whatever, this is going to be my flight time. And then the top one here is going to be my actual throttle time. So as soon as I give throttle, you can see there it starts to count down. Now, if I come down and land and I want to check something on the plane, I can just pause. So I've got this on a 3-position switch just here, and it'll just pause both timers. And then I can click it on again, and it'll just start going on again as soon as I'm up in the air. Land, everything off, pause, and away I go. One more click, resets the timer, and that's how I've got it set up on the radio. If you guys want, I don't know, if you got Spectrum radios and you want to know how to set that up, let me know. Maybe I can do a video on how I set up my timers like that on the Spectrum radio, but it should be pretty straightforward. Once you go into the timer setting on your Spectrum, you should be pretty easy to sort of set that up. Now, that's it as far as, you know, the initial setup of the plane goes. There are a couple more things that we need to cover, so I'll quickly turn my radio off here. Now, the other thing I want to cover is the prop and the ESC, because I'm not running a stock prop and I'm not running a stock ESC. Those of you with a keen eye will probably notice that I've got a plush 60 amp ESC in there, and my prop is a prop that I've been using on these planes, and you'll notice that all three of them have actually got the same prop. It is a Master Air Screw 7x3 propeller. This I find to be the best prop for this aircraft with this motor. The ESC that they supply is a 40 amp ESC, which works well, but I'm not a big fan of the stock prop that these come with. I've actually got about half a dozen of these props, obviously because I've had, you know, a few different planes, and not a single one has been properly balanced out of the box. Even when I try to balance them, they still, you know, vibrate a little bit. They resonate at full or certain RPMs, and I just don't find them to be very good props. I did fly this plane with the stock prop once when I did the maiden. I then landed, I think I swapped props and put a different 6x4 prop on there, and it actually flew a lot nicer. Like, it didn't have that really bad sound out of that stock prop. But then essentially when I got home, I just swapped out the ESC, swapped out the prop, and yeah, this is how the setup for me, the way it is, just works perfect. You have this a little bit more torque out of that motor. It just feels like it wants to fly, it wants to get off the ground, it wants to leave your hand when you launch it. The 7x3 prop, I think, works a lot nicer on these aircraft. It sounds amazing, and the average speed between all three of these is somewhere around about the 210, 220. I think the fastest one was this one at 239. This one was 231, and that one was 225 or something like that. Now, those speeds were all recorded with different batteries, even though they all have the same setup, and they were all recorded on the same day. So that gives you an idea how fast these things are, how good they sound, and how well they fly. Because this setup, if it didn't work, honestly, I wouldn't have it on these planes. And even my V1 had that exact same setup as well. So highly recommend that. Now, last but not least is going to be the batteries. And the batteries that, of course, you can use on this are 2200 4S, and I've used a couple of different brands, as you can see here. I've also got a couple of Turnigy packs that you see there, got the heavy duty and all that. So these packs here, they all fit in these planes, but these two in particular don't fit on the V2. These ones fit on all of them, but these ones here don't fit on the V2. And the reason for that is because you've got that rod going across the battery tray, and there's just not enough height for you to be able to fit something like this. Now, you can see that the lowest point is actually where I've got the Velcro there, so I'm going to try and fit this in here, and it just doesn't quite fit. Not only is the tray a little bit too narrow, but it's just not deep enough for me to be able to slide that underneath the actual spar on the plane. And the same thing goes with the Turnigy heavy duty. I can't quite get it in there. But these smaller packs, like the Tattoo one here, for example, that slides in there no problem, and then I can just stick it down on the Velcro, and you know, that's pretty much where the battery sits. So, and then I can just lift it up and take it out. Now, you'll notice the Velcro isn't all the way back. The reason for that is if you put the Velcro any longer, then you won't be able to slide the battery all the way to the back. It'll just get caught up on the Velcro, and it just, yeah, it won't be able to fit it in there. So that's pretty much it. Just keep an eye out for the size of batteries that you use for these. They do need to be like a 2200 4S. If you happen to be, you know, if you can be bothered modifying the battery tray, you can actually do what I did with this one, which was to kind of dig it out a little bit, and I put some epoxy down the bottom there, and now I can actually fit, you know, my Turnigy heavy duty, or Turnigy graphene rather, can actually go in there and fit no problem at all, right? So that will actually work without any issues, but you got to dig out that foam a little bit if you're feeling keen enough. Now, the original plane, which was the V1, which was this one here, which has seen better days. It needs to be repaired. I had a mishap with it some time ago, and I damaged the vertical stab, and all of these sort of came apart. So I'm in the process of fixing it. It's been in the closet for about 2 or 3 years. It's not on my priorities list, but this is the original plane. This one, as you can see, doesn't have a spar going across it, because they originally had this aluminium spar that was like a U shape, and now you can put whatever size battery you want to put in there. You can actually fly this with a fairly large battery, like a 3000 or something like that, if you want to get a little bit more flight time. But I wouldn't recommend it. The 2200 4S is probably ideal for these planes as far as size and weight goes. So that's pretty much everything, I think. I think the last thing before I forget is that you do need to modify the spinner to install these props. So the spinners look like this. So you can see it's got these little walls on there. And then to put those props, you got to cut them out a little bit. That's the only mod you need to do to the spinner to fit these props, because they have slightly larger hubs. And then that's it. Now you've got all the settings, you've got the plane set up. Now it's just a matter of going out there and flying. So now I get to give you a little bit of pilot feedback and also talk about some of the features and changes that they've done to this V2 Me-163. So one of the things that they've changed is this wheel that you've got back here. So this little guy is a new addition. The previous models didn't have the wheel, it was just a flat surface, and that made it a little bit tricky to rotate the plane and take off from the ground. They also made another change, which was to introduce a much wider dolly. Now this one slides in underneath the belly of the plane just here, and the original dolly, which is this guy here, was actually a lot narrower, and this made it very tricky to take off with this plane. Now the other thing that they've changed is the original one had a little magnet on here, and inside the plane there was a servo with the rotating magnet. So you would stick the landing gear onto the plane, take off, and then you'd flick a switch, the servo would rotate, reversing the polarity of the magnet, and it would push the landing gear out. Now that was a really cool idea, and I did it a few times and it worked, but it was very hard to rotate out because the plane was so unstable. Now with the wider landing gear and the little wheel on the back, I'm actually able to take off from the ground. It's actually a lot of fun to take off from the ground rather than hand launching. And we'll talk about hand launching in a little bit. But the other thing that they've changed is this landing gear is now just gravity fed, so it just falls out when you take off. And you'll notice that this one in particular has no paint on here, and that's because I actually sanded it back because it was getting jammed inside the plane. So that's something that I would suggest, you know, Hobbyking have a look at, because it wouldn't come off. Once I jammed it in there, it was just kind of stuck. So in order for the thing to fall out nice and easy as soon as it left the ground, I gave it a touch of sandpaper and took out some of the paint, and it falls out pretty much every time as soon as I get off the ground, which is really good. Now, if you don't want to use the dolly, if you perhaps have got some really rough terrain where you're flying these planes and you want to hand launch it, there is a way to do it. The way that I do it is, and I'll show you with some flight footage as well, is I pin the wing on the ground. So I make sure that the plane is leaning forward, so it's pointing downwards a little bit. So when I give it throttle, the plane is actually pushing towards the ground. If you are too vertical, or like horizontal, I guess, and you give it throttle, the plane might want to, take off before you're ready as soon as you give it throttle. So make sure the plane is leaning forward like that. And yeah, when you give throttle, take one step forward, release the plane about shoulder height, and it'll take off perfectly almost every time. And that's how I normally hand launch this thing. Now, it did take a few tries, but once you do it a couple of times, it's actually really easy, and you'll be amazed how you've never been able to do that before. So it's a really easy way to get this thing airborne if you've got some really rough runways, or if you're afraid of losing the dolly or whatever, if depending on where you are. Now, as far as flying this thing, it's an absolute bank and yank pocket rocket, right? I love the sound of this plane, whether it's full throttle or with the throttle off when the prop comes by and it's spinning. It's an amazing sounding aircraft. It looks fantastic in the air. You get some decent flight times from a 2200 4S, and it's just a lot of fun to fly, for a bank and yank little pocket rocket. I mean, this thing over 200 k's an hour, it's just a blast, and it always turns heads when I'm at the field. And that's why I have, so many of them. It's been a wild ride with this plane. Such a unique look. It's a wing, but it's got a vertical stab. And of course, you've got the option of sticking a rocket in the back if you want to do that as well. I think Hobbyking did a video on that many years ago when they first released these planes. So there might be still footage of that floating around online on how to set up a rocket. It's not something that I've ever explored or really intend to do. But who knows, maybe one day I might get the crazy itch to put a rocket in it and have some fun. But as it is, I absolutely love these things. I think they're fantastic, and I recommend anybody that's got the itch for some speed and wants something that's scale looking, historic, and is quite unique looking as well. This is definitely one that you should add to your hangar. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you now with some flight footage of the Me-163 V2. I also want to give a big shout out to Hobbyking for sending this out for review. I do appreciate them supporting the channel. And of course, they've recently opened up a new Australian warehouse. So depending on when you're watching this video, there's probably stock of this available locally as well. I will be sharing maybe some flight footage of the other planes in due course. So if you want to check those out, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I am going to be doing some more reviews in the coming weeks and months. So stay tuned for that. I've got a lot more content planned for this channel and a lot more things in the pipeline. It's just a matter of getting time to do it all. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button before you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time. All right, let's see if we can take off from the ground. I am running that 7-inch prop though, so I don't know if this is actually going to clear it properly, being a grass runway. I know that I've got enough clearance, but yeah, I may actually go, should I go mid rates? Let's try with low rates. Let's see what we can make happen here. I've not had much success with this in the past, but I've been asked to try, so let's try. Wow, okay. Yep. Once you get momentum, just go full throttle on it. Just hold back elevator gently and it pops up no problem. That's awesome. So I guess if you don't want to do the hand launch, you can do the dolly, but you're going to need to make sure the dolly falls out properly, because otherwise it's going to get stuck, unless you want to do the magnetic servo thing. Man, that's loud when it comes by. That's really loud. Okay, throttle off. That's so good. I love that so much. There's a reason why I have so many of these, because they're so good. The only one I don't have is the old red one, which hopefully one day I'll get, so I can have the full set. Okay, take her out a little wide, bleeding power off. Okay, idle, right there. Hold that back pressure. Look at that. So good. And my dolly's over there, so we can go grab that. Yeah, 4.5 minutes, that's not too bad. That's awesome. I can't believe the dolly worked. I've always had issues. I mean, I remember having issues with the little one on my V1, and ever since I've learned to hand launch these, I've never really bothered to do the dolly. But I was asked to do it. Apparently it works fine, especially now that it's gravity fed, so it just basically falls out as soon as you take off. And yeah, it just works. I think that's pretty good. Although I don't mind the little servo gizmo thing and dropping it. I don't see an issue with that, but this works too, and it works fine. I'm impressed. Very happy. Alright, we're going to do a speed test and we're going to use the dolly again. So let's see if this takes off okay. I'm always a little bit nervous with this, but let's see. I can't believe that works so well. That actually works really well. All right, come on, feed the power in, full pace. Whoa! Rocking a CNHL 2200 40C. One of the few packs I have that can actually fit in there. Going upstairs again, rolling over. And down the slide she goes, feed the power in, straight at us. Nice little barrel roll right in front. Easing off. Let's ease off, let catch a breath. Cruising by at about half throttle. Around we go. All right, let's go up again. Roll over. There's a bit of a gust now, which is perfect. Here we go. Feed and power in. Down the runway. Straight as an arrow. God, I love these things. It's so fun to fly. They look great. They sound awesome with this prop. And it's just fun. Just a really unique, interesting plane. I'm so glad they exist. Flies. Come on, man, please. Leave me alone. All right, one more pass. And we're coming for a landing. Here we go. Power off there. And just a little bit of power. Okay, idle. Here we go. Oh, nice. There's a bit of wind to slow it down. Oh, it's going to slow it right down. It's going to land right in front. Perfect.
Motor off.
Okay, let's see what we got. Then we have to go fetch our dolly over there before we forget. Let's see here. Stop. Read. 231. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Now I believe the figures. Now I believe the figures. All right, so they're all pulling about 230. That's fantastic. Okay, so the 180 was obviously the one that was out. These are the ones that count. I'm happy with that. Let's get our dolly and let's wrap this up. Airborne, perfect. Ooh. Nice. Oh. I'm about to take off, man. Do you mind? Stay there.
Timer start. Motor on.
Don't do nothing dumb. Okay. Here we go. Bit about back pressure. And away we go. She's airborne. Let's just glide it in. Here we go. See if you can bring it in semi close to us. Holding that little bit of back pressure. Actually needed a little bit of throttle. Perfect. Oh my god. Here's our dolly.
Motor off. Timer stop.
Here's our plane. 5 minutes in the air. Wow, I really cruised around on that one.